Finally. Okay. Almost there. Gave me about a minute. Had this stuff set up, but for some reason, like, my wonderful XSplit program decided to get rid of all my settings, unbeknownst to me. Let's refresh that. How does everything sound? Eh? So-so? You should get food, Mose. I sound good? Good. Let me take a look here. Doors are open again. That's cool. Let's fix that. Just gotta do my last announcement. And we should be good to go. Okay, now I should raging about the doors. I'm raging. Like I'm really angry at the doors. Okay. Show starting in T minus some arbitrary number of seconds before I start the show. Ha! It was not 32 seconds. It was probably around 15 or 16. But hello, I am Roger, also known as Dark Theory. Thank you for watching my show. Welcome. Today, well actually first off I'm going to start off with a couple announcements. First off, the usual stuff. Go to facebook.com/darktheorytv and like that page so you can get news and updates on this wonderful and somewhat interesting to most people show. And I say most people, I mean StarCraft, because obviously the general population could care less about these wonderful tactics we're going to go over today. Secondly, I would like to go over my email so that people can send me games, because I really want to get games and like analyze them and go over them, and I'm really interested in those games that people have where they feel like they play solidly, they feel like they did well, and for some reason they just lost. I really want to go over those games and actually maybe put them on a show so we can learn together as a group. So other than that, all the announcements I have, just the basic generic stuff. But today I do have a wonderful game from a friend of mine who you may be hanging out in the chat, named Honeybeard. I want to go over some basic stuff on there, and I kind of want to go over three specific things. One is when you're playing StarCraft anyway, there's a couple things I think are really important, and this should be from all levels of play, and of course the higher level of play you get, the more obvious it seems that you need to have this. But you're going to want to keep your money low, you're going to want to expand, and you're going to always want to be building things. I guess that's sort of like, or building units specifically. I guess spending money or keeping your money low and building units go hand in hand, but you never want to have too much money in the bank. But we're about to go over that. Other than that, how are you guys doing today? Thank you for watching, because I was expecting 2 people to watch. So the fact that I have more than that is actually pretty exciting. So we're doing good. Let's look at the chat. You're well. That's good to hear. I'm happy to see that you're here, man. You're here like all the time. You and Mose, you guys are awesome. I appreciate that. Gives me something to do. Gives me something to talk about. You're doing 7 out of 10, I assume. Turd Nation. 7 out of 10. And I have 7 viewers. What? Once again, that's awesome. Alright, so you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get started. I loaded up the game, but just as a forewarning, My StarCraft, for some reason, when I'm loading old replays, because these replays are prior to the 5 gig patch that they just did, it has been crashing on me a couple of times that I tried it. Hopefully that's not the case this time, but it's about a 2-3 minute fix, so if it does crash, it's not that big of a deal. But let's go ahead and go to that. Here we go. Let's take a look. You know what? How's the sound, guys? Is the sound okay? Nothing too bad. I'm gonna play it a little bit, and the sound should be very low, if there at all. I played with this earlier. Okay. So here we have Honeybeard in our top side as the Terran, building a couple SCVs, which is exactly what you're going to want to do when you're starting a match against any computer or regular opponent. I'm going to go to sound because I'm not hearing anything at all, and you know what? That sound is on. I think I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. Hold on a second, guys. Oh, you know what? Options. I'm gonna actually lower the sound because I feel like it's gonna be very low and I don't, or very high, and I don't want that. So you know, let's enable sound, but let's not enable music. Oops. Here we go. He's just watching stuff. I'm gonna fix something real fast while that does its thing. Good, good. Alright, I mean, there's some basic stuff going on, so I'm going to skip this a little bit, or at least I'm going to, not necessarily skip it, I'm just going to go through it a little bit quickly. Let's go through a little bit of fast forward. Yes, because he's awesome. He plays in green. Now this is what I thought was kind of cute, going straight for gas. Generally this happens when we have a player who wants to go for a very heavy gas unit. But I think that Honeybeard is just planning ahead, which is good. Usually you'll see them go straight for a supply depot, as he's doing right here, and then straight into barracks. Some Terrans actually avoid gas for a couple of minutes at least, just so they have time to build up some Marines to do some early defenses. But in this case, we are just prepping for the future. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit more. Now right here, I'm already a little bit, I guess you could say, concerned. The 300 minerals doesn't sound like a lot in the long run, but at the 2.5, 3 minute stage, you really don't want to have that much money unless you're early expanding, okay? So that's one thing that we really want to concentrate on the next time we play, is you're going to want to make sure that your money is a little bit lower at this time in the game unless you're actually building, or unless you're planning on building 6 barracks like somebody else in the chat knows all about. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and speed it up a little bit more. Now keep in mind, this is against the computer, and this is actually quite a long match, and you'll see that. And here we have him starting the barracks at about the 4-minute mark. It's a little bit late, but we're assuming that the computer doesn't know what's going on, and to some extent it doesn't. Oh, and you know what? We saw a little peek of an overlord right over here. Maybe Honeybeard saw that at the time. See him getting an engineering bay, maybe considering getting some upgrades. He has the gas for it. Oh, and if we take a look here, there's actually oversaturation on this refinery, okay? What you're going to want to do is be a little bit careful when you're rallying your units, or when you're moving your units to the refinery, because the most they'll be able to take out of gas is only going to be like 3 SCVs at the time. If we take a look, it shows that there's 4 harvesters. The most you'll ever need for any refinery is going to be 3, so keep that in mind, guys. Let's go ahead and play that again. Here we have Honeybeard doing that basic defense. Not too worried about the side over here because we have these wonderful rocks preventing from any sneaky attacks. Building a bunker, which is good. Building some turrets for the front lines. Now keep in mind, when you're building this much defense in this area, if you're playing against a regular player and they're using any air units, they're probably just going to swoop around over here and do some damage to all your SCVs. So generally when you see turrets being built, they're going to be around this area. But here isn't terrible. Just want to make sure that we have all of our bases covered. If we know we're going against an enemy who's going to be heavy ground, not very much air, this isn't a bad idea. And actually the money isn't too bad. I've definitely seen way too much money at this time, but this isn't bad. I see that you're building buildings, which is really good. We're going to want to keep that up. This has some units in queue, which is a positive thing. I see the upgrades, which is really awesome, because some people, especially newbies, tend to completely ignore upgrades. So this is a good habit to get into. Let's fast forward a bit. Now, might I add that this is the fastest, like the most faster than probably anything, any Ghost Academy I have ever seen. I think it started at about 6.5 minutes, so it's already done. But this is really, really awesome. These ghosts... Now, generally you won't see ghosts until the late game because they're very specialized units, but here I've actually had somebody, as the Zerg, I've had people use really, really early ghosts and snipe my roaches to kill them real quickly, because generally roaches are pretty beefy units. And here we just, exactly these guys right here, as you can see they were taking some hits. Ghosts, if they have enough energy, can go through them like nothing. Now, as far as early, mid-game, late-game units goes, Ghost is generally a late-game unit, but you can squeeze it into the mid-game if you know what you're doing, especially against Protoss, because they have the ability to lower Protoss shields very quickly. Your early-game units are going to be coming straight from this barracks, such as your Marine, your Marauder, even your Reaper, okay, with the exception of your Ghost, because you do need a Ghost Academy to build that. From there, mid-game is going to be around here. Well, actually, in early game, you could still build Hellions. Then you can go to tanks, and then Thors. Thors, I would say, are definitely more late game, but some players have been liking using it late mid game, if you will.
Upgrade complete.
All right. And here we have an expansion. I'm really happy that you expanded. The reason being because some players, especially when they're first starting, they completely avoid expansions and they just build a small army off of one base and go attack. And that's not, I mean, to some extent that's not bad because sometimes they do get pretty successful with that, but in general, overall, that's not the best thing to do. I'm a little bit worried here because we haven't scouted much and they could be coming with a small army and we don't really have much of a place to defend this. We do have a bunker, but with enough roaches and lings, this is going to go down pretty easily. Let's slow it down just a little bit. Another thing that Mo's brought up a little bit earlier is you want to have rally points. By selecting a building and then right-clicking somewhere else, it won't let me do it because I'm not controlling the game, you'll be able to rally your units. So as soon as they come out of this building, they'll go straight to where you had them rallied just by right-clicking, so that's something to try out. Just like when you select your command center, it has that little orange or brown line going straight to minerals. They're rallied to that area. Let's go ahead and speed it up again. Now, where am I at? Another thing I wanted to mention real quickly is that this probably wasn't the best place to expand. There's a couple of choke points, which isn't bad, but generally as you play against other computers, this will happen, and it'll happen faster, and it'll happen harder. Because of that, we lost this expansion, which is not a good thing, because at this point in the game, we should probably have about 3 expansions as the Terran. Here we go. And this is going to go down. A little bit more of an ideal place to expand I would have recommended would have been all the way over here. The reason why is because we do have some defense right here. They would have to destroy this in order to get to your base. If I go back over here, Marines, as you can see, get torn up by roaches pretty easily, okay? Just as a heads up, when you see roaches in numbers, a really good unit to use against these guys is going to be the Marauder, which is this guy, which we can't build because we don't have a barracks that has a tech lab on it. Well, we actually do, but it's about to go down. Now remember, and I'm actually going to back up just a tad, that these buildings have the ability to lift up, okay? Now since it's building stuff, it won't be able to, but if it wasn't building these SCVs, it would be able to lift up and you can just shift them all the way back over here, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward. And we're going to see that go down again. And like I said, over here you're going to want to have an expansion. Now when you expand over here, you're going to want to have some eyes on this, just to make sure that it's not getting destroyed, because this destructible debris will go down, and the enemy will be able to use this ramp. So just be careful of that next time.
Base is under attack.
And Planetary Fortress is going to be pretty convenient if we're getting attacked early on. But you really don't want to have it here because the orbital command will allow you to earn money a little bit faster. And look, we see just a few more harvesters there than we need. Okay. We have another one made over here. Another refiner. We have a tank. Now, in Wings of Liberty, in order to get siege mode, you're going to have to use the upgrade, which is in the tech bay, which is 100-100. I actually like that you got this upgrade for the buildings. It gives +2 armor. Now, these tanks are going to be really good against roaches because they do extra damage to armored units, as you can see right here. If they were in siege mode, they'd be doing a ridiculous amount of damage, okay? Now remember that you can heal these buildings by repairing them. And if you have 8 or 9 Marines on one building, 8 Marines, if you have 8 or 9 SCVs on the same building repairing it, it's going to get repaired pretty quickly. You also need to be careful with these tanks. You want to move them back because they could come with a few lings and just snipe these. And these are really expensive units to build, and they're quite important in the late game if you decide to go the mech route anyway. And I remember you're going to expand. You're going to expand pretty soon. I remember that. Come on. Come on. Another thing I'd probably like to mention is that you're going to want to scout a little bit more. These Zelnaga towers, if you have a marine here, a marine here, a marine here, you're going to see when they're coming at you, so you'll be able to defend appropriately. We saw that the Overlord was there. Here we have that expansion coming, just like what I was talking about. You got a lot of money. Spend it. Build buildings that build units is something that you're going to want to do as the Terran. Build more barracks. It's just because it seems like you don't want to have too many, you cannot have too many barracks unless it covers the map, and that's too many. But other than that, if you have like, at this time you're at about a few minutes into the game by now, you can have at least, I'd say 8 or 9 barracks easy, depending on what army composition you have. If you're going mech, you're going to want to have a lot of factories. If you're going bio, you're going to want to have a lot of barracks, okay? I did see that you did scout earlier, but now we don't have any eyes on the rest of the map. The problem that that's going to do is that even though you knew what was happening earlier, you're not going to know what's happening right now. And that's exactly what this player 2 is doing. It's actually scouting you. Now that it sees you have an expansion, it's probably going to get some more units ready. Because whenever you see the other player expand, their army value is going to, not necessarily lower, but we know that their army value isn't going to increase because it's really expensive. Okay? And now we have a small army of Zerg units. Let's see how this turns out. And we have the Viking going after the Overlord instead of the Mutalisk. But the turrets took care of those Mutalisks, which is awesome. And these bunkers are doing their job. There you go. And it's gonna burn down. No! Okay. The Fusion Core. The Fusion Core. That's pimp. Look at that fire. Okay. Let's go back over here. We're working on this. Here, now we have a little bit better of a saturation as far as SCVs go. Oh, something I forgot to mention. On mineral patches, you're always going to want to have about 24 SCVs on them. Anything less than that, you're not saturating it enough. Anything more than that, and you're not getting any extra money out of there. Hashtag swag, that is correct. Let's go ahead and speed it up just a bit. Now remember, to sort of go back to what I was talking about earlier, you want to keep your money low at this point, and to be fair, a lot of players do have this much money in the bank at this time, but that's because they have about 3 or 4 different bases going on right now, and they have about 75 SCVs mining minerals, okay? If you're off of one base like this, I mean, you do have a base over here, but I really don't consider this a base since it's pretty much mined out. If you have a base like this, you should not have this much money. You should be spending money to expand or spending money to attack or defend. Ooh, and we have our fancy ghosts. Let's look at these guys. dropships. Oh, another cool thing that I really liked about your play is that you had a nice unit mixture. Okay, you generally want to have a lot more than this. If we take a look at your food is only running around 77 to 86 or so. At this time, you're going to want to be really past 200, which can be solved easily by always keeping your money low, which is what we talked about. You're always going to want to expand, and you're always going to be wanting to build units. Food/supply, is that what you mean? If you want to learn more about the units as you build them, just select them. We have another fight. See the battlecruiser tear up these mutalisks and roaches. If you want to learn a little bit about each unit, you can go ahead and just select it, and you'll get some information right down here as far as how much HP it has, how much energy it has, which is going to be that color down there. You're going to get your armor right here, which is 3 armor. Damage is going to be 8, and damage is going to be 6 for anti-air and ground. So the damage on the ground is a little bit stronger than the damage in the air. If you're kind of curious about how armor works, it's pretty simple. Think about it like this. If we have, okay, this unit, I'm doing one that has no upgrades. This unit has 3 armor, okay? The Marine does 7 damage right now. So 7 minus 3 is 4. So if this Marine was to shoot this battlecruiser, it'll only do 4 damage because its armor is 3. Does that make sense, everybody? Is that making everything... I see that you're talking about Jesse Eisenberg. He's a delightful actor. Although he's a little typecast, I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. Ooh, and our Zerg buddies are breaking a rule. Here we go. We have them scouting a little bit with an overseer.
Research complete.
Let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit.
Research complete.
Here, things are looking a little bit better. I do see a lot more food, and actually, at this point, I feel like you're really getting into the game as far as building units, things like that. I mean, I would still like to see more expansions, but for this being such an early game, this really isn't bad. This is you getting. I feel like there's positive habits, and if they were just utilized a little bit more, you see, like this was perfect. Like this was really good because you just defeated an army so quickly. That was because of the army composition. These heavy guys, the Marauders that do extra damage against armored units, were taking care of the armored units pretty quickly. And the Ghosts, the Marines, and the Reapers were taking care of light armored units and everything else in between. This guy was taking the hits for you, so even though it didn't seem like it, this was actually a pretty fair composition. I mean, generally, you would take out Reapers and Ghosts because the Marines, Marauders, and probably the Cruisers would be just fine. But it's not bad to experiment with different unit compositions. I definitely recommend that, especially as a beginner. Here we go. And here we do see a little bit of what's going on in their base. We don't see that they've expanded too much, so we're not too worried about that, which is good. Yeah, drop shifts. Yeah, we really do have almost one of everything, which is awesome. Don't hesitate to play around with it. This is a great time. We're expanding, which is good. This is a great time to just sort of have fun with the game. What's really neat about... oh, we have some scouting done by the Zerg. What's really cool about StarCraft Heart of the Swarm in the new update is that you can play against the computer. If you win, it'll put you against a stronger computer. If you beat that computer, it'll put you against a stronger computer. So it's pretty much matching you up with a computer AI that's pretty much as good as you, which is going to be really helpful later on. The transfer of the SCVs. And the mutas, roaches and hydras. Those got taken out pretty easily. I noticed you did some upgrades earlier, but you kind of stopped. We want to be keeping those up. If you want to go ahead and keep those up, you're going to have to build an armory, which can be done by selecting an SCV, pressing V for advanced building, and then A for armory. And here we're going in for the attack. As you can see, the Reaper's a little bit faster than everybody else. Oh, and they're taking the hits from those roaches. And here you go. Now, targeting down the hatchery is a pretty good idea because this prevents them from mining minerals, which could be really helpful in a place where you're getting a fight. Now, another thing that you'll notice are these little guys that came out. Whenever you destroy a Zerg building, the Zerg building will pop, and these guys will come out. Though they do have a timed life, so they'll die regardless of what happens to them, or regardless of what you do to them. They do damage, even though it's not a lot. If you have a small army of, or a couple Marines that just destroyed a building, and these guys run after them, these guys will kill those Marines. Because you have so much coverage here, it's not going to make much of a difference, but it is something to be careful of if you decide to harass later. We have some queens, we have a small... Ooh, and a nuke. We have a nuke. Let's see what happens with that nuke. Ah! And the computers has good etiquette by trying to GG out, but will you let them GG out? No. Because you need this bomb to land. You need it to land so bad that a couple of your Marines were dealing with it. And that's okay though, because if you want to make an omelet, you gotta break a few eggs, right? And as you can see, these little guys, they're doing a little bit of damage. Fortunately, your dropships are actually healing you, so you don't have to worry about it too much. It's a good thing the game didn't go much longer, because this Ultralisk cavern might have created issues for you when Ultralisks started to spawn out. Focusing down the main buildings. That's pretty much the end of that. Now, in the very beginning, I remember we were running a little bit short. We had a little bit of an overage on money, which you're going to want to try doing for future reference, and for everybody, in fact, who's new to the game, or even for people who aren't new to the game. You're going to want to make sure that your money is spent, especially in the early game. Up here, where you have quite a bit of money. If you're at a point where you're ahead of the enemy, you feel like you have more army count, you feel like you can do a lot more, then you're going to want to expand. Because if you're ahead, you want to keep ahead, and that helps. Okay. So with that being said, I mean, we also have, we already went over expanding, keeping the money low, and always rebuilding units. That was done, but not until later. You're going to want to do that a little bit sooner, and you're going to want to max out your army as, not necessarily as fast as you can, but in a strategic way. Is this a Metroid? That looks like a Metroid. I never noticed that. I'm pretty sure that's a Metroid. Anyway, that's the end of this part. This wasn't nearly as long as the other ones, which is awesome because I'm trying to keep my time low. But I think I'm going to go ahead and go over another game that's a little bit longer. And we're going to try to go over some of the other things that, well, pretty much the same things, like keeping the money low, expanding, and always building units, and how that affects, like, mid-level players rather than early-level players, and how it's important throughout your StarCraft gaming career, I guess you could say. So, give me a couple minutes. Did we have any questions before we go on to the next game? I assume that is a no. I'm going to go ahead and quit this replay and get into another one. That's something that a lot of new people do, is when you ignore upgrades when you're attacking. It's because you need to learn how to multitask. That's honestly as simple as that gets. Like in using, I've been avoiding this, but using hotkeys. I think in one of the upcoming games, and actually this game, I'm gonna go ahead and show it how the players are using hotkeys and how they're able to do multiple things at once. So even though they're out attacking and they're fighting and they're losing units and getting units, they're still upgrading and they're still building units, and there's a constant flow of them. So multitasking is going to be pretty important. Okay, so give me just a minute, guys, and let me get this up for you. What do I want to make you listen to? Ooh, let's do this throwback. Alright, let's do this. Why is my sound so weird? Okay. Let's pause that. Can you guys hear me? Everything sound aight? Oop. Everything should be aight. Okay. Hello. Nomos. Oops, excuse me. Okay guys, here we are with the overlay again, actually set appropriately. Here we have Jason on the left hand side, good friend of mine. On the right we have Daiwa, the Terran. I'm going to concentrate on the Terran because a lot of players like to be Terran when they first play, but I'm going to stray away from that pretty soon. Let's go ahead and play this. Speed it up a little bit because a lot of the game is just, well, a lot of the beginning anyways, pretty standard stuff, if you will. If we take a look, always building from the command center, at least until he has about 75 or 76 buildings, what the hell am I talking about, SCVs, and we're going to find that out later. Now this is, I'm really happy that he did this as a generic wall-off. As a Terran, you're always going to want to do this against Zerg. The reason why is because the Zerg, of all the different races, they can build units a lot faster than the other ones. So if you leave this open, they can come in with Zerglings and harass your mineral line before you have a sufficient number of Marines out to defend. Moser, you're being racist. I am a moderator, so I have to kick you if you're being racist, according to the Twitch.tv terms and conditions. Here, we have this Marine here for scouting. Now, something that I did talk about before was having a little too much money. If we would have looked a few moments earlier, Daiwa was going to have about 500 minerals in the bank. Generally, we don't want to see that, but there was a reason behind it. It's because he's doing what's called an early expand. If you feel comfortable and okay enough to feel like the Zerg isn't going to attack you very soon, yeah, go for it. Go for that early expansion. It does set you behind, but if the Zerg is expanding really early too, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to hurt you too much. He's building this bunker for early defense in case he decides to, Zerg decides to change their mind. We can see he's actually scouting. Getting through it. And pops. But that was enough information to see how far our friend Jason was going. We were able to figure out that he does not have, or he's just now building an extractor. Previously he didn't have an extractor. Since he was not getting gas, that tells us he's not going to do any like really early attack, and if he does, it's going to be with slow Zerglings, and slow Zerglings aren't very good against bunkers and Marines, especially in large numbers. And look at the time, at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, he has this expansion up, and he's already building an orbital command so he can get even more money. So not only is he spending money, he's spending that money to make more money, which is the telltale signs of a macro game. What a macro game is a game where the player concentrates on building their economy and then they start acting offensively by attacking. I'm not talking about offensively by saying rude things about the other person's mother. I mean about attacking with units. Alright, so we have 3 barracks already. It's the 6.5 minute mark. He might want to try popping up another barracks, but it depends on what he's trying to do, obviously. Looks like he's teching up. He's going to be spitting out some more Marines with that reactor, and he's also going to be researching some Marine technology. And here Jason's scouting with his Overlord. At this point Jason knows that he's not planning any big attack, because since there's so few stuff in the main base, it's obvious that he's probably pretty expanded, or that he's expanded already. Because if we look at Jason's view, other than losing his Overlord, it doesn't look like he has an expansion. But the more you play the game, the more you notice that it's at the 7.5 minute mark, and this player only has this. There's a good chance he's expanded, especially when you see this here, because there's no reason why this would defend nothing over here. Let's go back to our friend Daiwa. Oops. Take a look at that real fast. Give me a second. We have a crap load of Marines. This is Terran early game. Nothing unheard of. I'm a little bit thrown off that Jason has so much money. Let's go ahead and take a look to see exactly what he's doing. He does have a third expansion. I do feel like this expansion is a little bit late for the Zergs, especially high-level ones, tend to have the third base up before the 8-minute mark and not just building it around the 8-minute mark. If that's the case, he might have been attacked early, but this game didn't really have any early attacks. Oops. Let's go back to Terran. Let's speed it up a bit.
Let's be quiet.
So here he's teching up. I feel at this point that he is spending a lot of money, so I think that he does need to attack with that. Because if he's not saving money to expand, he should be saving that money to attack, and if he's not doing either one of those things, he's setting himself behind. He also doesn't have a lot of map control with Daiwa, so we'd probably want to look at that. And it is bad to lose overlords, but later on in the game you're making so much money that you can replenish them pretty quickly, I guess you could say. If you lose them in the early game, that can set you back a little bit more than what it seems, because your income is a lot lower. It will set you back a little bit more. But very commonly, Zergs will do something called suiciding an overlord by just getting an overlord and throwing them into the center of the other person's base just to see what they're doing. Because what they're really doing is spending 100 minerals, the cost of an overlord, to figure out what the enemy is doing. Because if the enemy is going, say, all air, you're not going to build a bunch of units that only attack ground. The problem with that, obviously, is that if they have air units, they're going to kill your ground units without your ground units being able to attack upwards.
Research.
Yeah, Mozio does bring up a great point. There was a little Zergling here that ran up as these guys were coming out. These guys killed it pretty quickly, and what that does is it gives Jason an idea of what kind of army he's going to be up against. And since he knows what kind of army he's going against, a lot of biological units, he's going to go ahead and get a lot of Zerglings, which I believe will turn into Banelings, as we saw up here. And then we have these dropships. So this is a pretty good composition. It's a little bit more basic than Honeybeard's from the last game, but it's still pretty effective. Because these guys will attack, they have such a high attack rate that anything small will die pretty quickly. These guys have a slower attack rate, but anything armored will die pretty quickly to them because they do extra damage to armor, if you guys recall. That's been a pretty slow game so far. See that he's building an armory. He's doing upgrades, which is good. The problem with this, a lot of mid-level players do, is that they're able to keep the money low. They're looking to expand. I mean, with the exception of Daiwa right here. If we take a look at our Zergy buddy, he's already had his third expansion up. He actually should definitely consider upgrading or getting another. Oops. Let's go back to this. Getting another expansion. Right here we have some Marines going down with some Marauders. And this is called a form of harassment, where you come with a dropship, you drop some Marines or some Marauders, and you go try to attack Zerg's expansions. As you can see, Zergs can go ahead and attack pretty quickly just by coming back with some Zerglings and some Banelings, and they'll be able to take care of that pretty fast. But if Daiwa is a little bit better at what's called microing, and macro, as we talked about before, is working on the long-term game, working on economy, things like that. Micro is the tiny little battles that happen and how you control your units within that battle. So right there, if Daiwa would have microed a little bit better and had his multitasking a little bit better, he'd have been able to work at home by building SCVs, maybe thinking about doing an expansion, and trying to get his Marines and Marauders back into the medevacs to leave. Because you don't want to suicide units like that, because drops are very expensive compared to what you can gain. So what you'll see a lot of high-level players do is they will go in, snipe a few drones, pick up their units, and leave. And we see here that Jason is building a bunch of Banelings, which do a lot of damage to biological units. Biological meaning, well, light units, I'm sorry. Units that don't have armor. Which they do a lot of damage to these guys right here. Yeah, we have something going on. And here we go. And here, Daiwa saw this was happening, and he did what's called a split, which is a form of macroing. Because if one of these guys pop, as you can see, they have a large radius of damage. Okay? That radius right there. Anything within that radius of the enemy units will take damage. And those banelings do a lot of damage. It's to versus light, 39 damage. That's a lot of stuff. They can one-shot a generic marine, a basic marine, okay? Well, without the help. Well, actually, no, they can't one-shot. But they can get pretty close to it, especially with a mixture of Zerglings. Let's go through that. And this was another problem that Daiwa did, is he was getting reinforcements and he was doing what we talked about before, which is the rally points. And you see, this line is what I was talking about in the previous game. If you select a building and you right-click, it will send the rally point. Whenever a unit comes out of that building, it'll go to the end of that rally point, okay? The problem was that he had some reinforcements coming down through this path, just down here, to help out with his army, but he was too busy microing his army down here that he didn't see his other guys coming down. The problem with that is that those guys die pretty quickly, because if there's a lot of lings, they're going to die pretty quick. Here's another important thing that Jason was doing very well. Right here he sees that Daiwa's trying to finally get an expansion. It's 15 minutes into the game right now, and if you only have 2 expansions, that's not really good because you're running out of money pretty quick, or you're not able to maintain your economy, because you always want to maintain your economy. Now Daiwa had a good idea by attacking and trying to build another unit, or try to build an expansion at the same time, but the problem is that since he lost that other army, Zerglings were able to roll over them and come in and attack this main base. What Jason is doing is he's preventing him from getting that expansion, which is going to slow down his economy, which is going to slow down his reinforcement rate. And then we see some more fights. Here, this is perfect. I love that Jason did this. He was actually trying to expand. When he's ahead, he knows he's ahead, he's going to try to expand so that he can build more units and to spend his money. At this point, Daiwa is not in a good position. He does have a lot of units, but the units that he's upgraded and the units that he can build are directly countered by the Zerglings and the Banelings. Right now he's safe, but we have the Zergling planted to see if Daiwa tries to expand again. And right now he's just stuck. He has a lot of dropships, he has few Marines, and not many Marauders, which isn't a bad idea. Marauders don't do so hot against Zerglings, but they do okay against Banelings because they can take a lot of hits from Banelings. Not too many, though. Here, we can look at the barracks count. 5 barracks. 2 factories, and we see this fight right here. Oh, we have Mutalisks. This is a little bit of a strange fight, or a strange transition. Generally, Zerglings, or Zergs, if they see a lot of ground units like Marines, Marines really kill Mutalisks pretty quickly. But these Mutalisks, I feel like, I don't want to say were a bad decision, but were meant solely for the purpose of harassing and preventing his third. Oh, we missed this part right here. But Daiwa just came in and destroyed the base that was in this area. And now he's trying to go in and take care of this base. He does a pretty good job of it. And this is what I really don't like. This was, right now, Jason was in a really good position. He had 5 bases, and he has a lot of units. He could have had a few more units, because if you look at his money, it's so high right now. If he'd have utilized that and actually transitioned into better units, because if we take a step back, these are all early game units. Be it they're upgraded, which does help, and the fact that Daiwa didn't really change from his early game units at all, he didn't go to mid game very much other than by building some dropships which heal these guys. He didn't do a lot of transitioning because he was stuck on 2 base and he didn't feel comfortable trying to expand. Because when you have a good enough economy, that's when you're going to want to build mid game units, end game units, things like, or late game units, things like that. And let this fight happen. And the surround, as you can see how he has these Zerglings and he's clicking over here? It's because he wants to do that surround that Mozio was talking about. Just so that can happen. Now fortunately he did get most of his army out by putting them into these medevacs, which is good, but this is a problem. The mutas were actually perfect for that because the mutas can kill those pretty easily, with the exception of the Marines if they're dropped. And now he's just coming in with his Zerglings. This was just overall excellent execution of seeing where Daiwa's units were and Jason just going in and attacking them. Here, Jason knows that Daiwa doesn't have another expansion, so he's just going to go for it, which is totally understandable. Daiwa knows this, so he's trying to build turrets, and turrets do a lot of damage to Mutalisks, but he just started those a little too late. No money, and that's it. Now, what inevitably killed Jason, or I'm sorry, killed Daiwa, was just his inability to expand. That's another form of aggression, actually, is just to prevent expansion. He does have one siege tank, but siege tanks tend not to do very well against Zerglings in mass numbers. But the positioning of this tank is not bad because Zerglings can't easily get up here and attack this. And the Zergling is just outside of it. Now here he's trying to finally get another expansion, but it's a little late for that. These Mutalisks can just come in and just finish the job, essentially. So even though Daiwa kept his money low, he wasn't able to build units because he wasn't able to expand. Of those 3 rules that I sort of went over already, if they're not all working like together and you miss one part of that, everything else sort of like falls apart after that, and that sort of like can ruin your game. If you're going against somebody and somebody else is having the same issues as you, then that's okay because you can sort of make up for it. But harassing is a good way to prevent from expansions. Constant attacking isn't what I recommend because a lot of new people try doing this and they don't know how to do it well. And what happens is that their army gets lost and they spend a lot of money building that little army and it gets destroyed and the other guy still has their army and they have an economy to back it up. So that's a problem. Today's episode was a lot shorter than the other ones, which is awesome. I didn't want it to go on too long for boredom purposes. But actually Moziel's great. What suck against Mutalisks? Oh, Hellions and tanks, yeah. Hellions and tanks actually would have made a difference for Daiwa a little bit. I mean, but that just depends on positioning. Had he built the Hellions, and the reason why Moziel was mentioning Hellions is because Hellions do like splash damage, which we talked about in the last time, and they do a lot of damage versus light units, and Banelings and Zerglings are light units. I didn't like how both of these players didn't transition to mid-game units because I feel like if either one of them had done that, then they probably would have won the game, to be honest. If I think the same thing about tanks too. If he had tanks in a good position, I think that would have defended a lot easier as well. But yeah, I mean, that's some basic stuff on there. Is there any questions? Is there anything else anybody wants to go over? I'm kind of looking for a topic for next week, so I'm kind of interested in looking at a game to see where somebody did not do well, so we can figure out why not. If not, that's cool. But yeah, Terran didn't respond very well. I'm happy that you know that. I do agree, Moziel. Terran did need more harassment. I still think that even with a little bit more harassment, I still think that Jason could have pulled it out, especially if pulled out the game had he appropriately expanded more, because it took him a long time to get that 4th and 5th expansion. Generally at that time you have probably around that those expansions are done and they're being saturated, not getting started, and I think that was like the 18 or 19 minute mark. I think they both could have done better, but overall Jason did play the better game. He responded correctly. He saw that Daiwa had specific units. He built counters to those units, which is perfect. It seems like another basic thing too. I'm sort of straying away from that because it can get a lot more complicated when you're trying to build counters to units rather than just units. But that's why it's important to just play the game and just learn it and just have fun with it. That's true. A definition of insanity, that is true. But if there was good positioning, there's players like Boxer, Marine King Prime, who continuously build Marines when they see Banelings. Because Banelings, if you build too many of them, they're not that effective, especially if it's against a high-level player, because what will happen is that high-level player will have a bunch of Marines and they'll just spread out the Marines beautifully. So even though some of those Banelings land, it's not close enough to other Marines to do enough damage to everybody. It just does a little bit of damage to like 2 Marines. And Banelings are kind of expensive. It's 50, after you make the Zergling and then you build them, it's 50 minerals and 25 gas. That's kind of expensive for the amount that you build. So you're going to want to, I mean, I'm not saying to go all Marine when you see Banelings, especially at these early levels. You don't want to do that. But if you do see Banelings and Marines, I'm sorry, banelings and lings. You're really going to need to worry about positioning. Build a few more marauders to take those hits from those banelings and lings, zerglings. Hellions would be good because Hellions do the splash damage like what Mosier was talking about. If you're worried about getting attacked a lot, build some siege tanks at home because siege tanks take out banelings in one hit. And it's splash, so one siege tank blast can take out probably around 3 or 4 banelings easy and do damage to surrounding ones. So that's something to think about.